Let me tell you something about people. A lot of them can spend years building a life and then destroy it in a single moment. Today, we're diving into a collection of real stories from across Reddit, moments where one decision, one impulse, one flash of ego or stupidity completely unraveled everything. Some of these will shock you, some will frustrate you, and some will make you wonder how people like this even exist. Welcome to Reddit Echoes. Let's begin. Story 1. The holiday party kiss that destroyed a marriage and a career. You know, I always thought corporate holiday parties were harmless. Awkward small talk, cheap wine, maybe one guy who tries too hard at karaoke. Nothing changing life. But this year? Oh, this year taught me that sometimes you really can destroy your entire life in one extremely stupid moment. So there's this guy at my company, let's call him Mark. Married, mid-40s, normal suburban dad energy. The kind of guy who brings apple slices to meetings because healthy snacks improve productivity. Harmless, forgettable, safe. And like a lot of people at work, he had a work wife. You know the type. Inside jokes, lunch buddies, definitely too close but not technically doing anything wrong. Except she was a rank below him, so it was already skating on thin ice with HR. Well, at the holiday party, Mark apparently decided it was the perfect time to become the boldest man alive. A couple glasses of wine, a few shots someone convinced him to take, and suddenly he's acting like the main character in a romance drama no one asked for. I don't know how it started, but everyone saw how it ended. The two of them absolutely going at it in a corner of the banquet hall like teenagers trying to ruin their parents' living room furniture. Consensual, yes. Career suicide level stupid? Also yes. Monday morning rolls around, and HR does this thing where they call it a discussion, but everyone knows they already printed the termination papers. They hit him with the zero tolerance policy for fraternization with subordinates. Boom, fired. Not even a quiet firing either, just a spectacular corporate implosion. And believe it or not, that wasn't even the worst part, because when he got home and tried to explain the situation to his actual wife, she apparently stared at him with the kind of expression people reserve for things like burnt lasagna and nuclear waste. No yelling, no dramatic slap, just a calm, devastating, "We're done here." She filed for divorce immediately. So, in less than 72 hours, Mark managed to lose his job, his reputation, his marriage, and probably any future holiday party invitations. All because he got drunk and decided the best use of a corporate event was to behave like HR didn't exist. I swear, every time someone says one mistake won't ruin your life, I think about Mark and go, yeah, actually, it can. Story 2. She sold deadly pills twice and sent herself to prison. I used to know this woman, someone who always looked like she was one lucky break away from getting her life together. You know the type, charming in a chaotic way, convinced the universe owed her a favor, and absolutely terrible at making decisions that didn't immediately backfire. She was involved in dealing pills, nothing glamorous, just low-level stuff she thought would bring in easy money. But one day the game changed. She got hold of a batch she knew was bad. Not maybe questionable, not slightly stronger than usual. No, these were pills laced with fentanyl, the kind where one dose can kill someone instantly. She found out the hard way when her first buyer overdosed and died. Any normal person would have panicked and thrown the rest away. You'd think a death on your conscience would be enough to slam the brakes, but not her. Nope, she looked at the remaining pills, looked at the money she spent on them, and apparently decided that the real tragedy here wasn't a dead customer, it was being $20 in the hole. So she sold them again, same pills, to a second person. And, shock of absolutely no one, they died too. 2 deaths, same batch, same seller, same choice. Honestly, it was surreal watching her pretend that life was going to keep going like normal. She was still hanging around town, still chatting with friends, still acting like the universe was being dramatic and she just had a streak of bad luck. Meanwhile, the police were quietly putting together a case so airtight you could have dropped it in the ocean. And the thing that took her down wasn't some gritty undercover bust or a dramatic sting operation. It was her text messages. Turns out she had been chatting with her dealer the whole time, text after text, where she flat out acknowledged she knew exactly what was in the pills and exactly what would happen. It wasn't just a smoking gun, it was her firing it at her own foot. When the case finally hit court, the prosecution didn't even have to work hard. They just read her messages out loud, word for word, while she sat there realizing that her entire life, every excuse, every denial, was collapsing in real time. The judge gave her life in prison. All because she couldn't accept losing $20. All because she thought cutting corners was easier than facing reality. All because she treated human life like a rounding error in her financial plans. I think about it sometimes, how fast everything unraveled for her. 2 sales, 2 deaths, and a lifetime spent paying for $20 she couldn't let go of. Story 3. My coworker burned alive because a boss wanted the job done fast. I still think about that day more often than I want to admit. It wasn't supposed to be anything special, just another job, another assignment, another moment where you grit your teeth and deal with whatever nonsense management throws your way. But it turned into the worst day of my life and the last normal day my friend ever had. Back then, I worked in field service, doing energy work. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I had a close friend on the team, the kind of guy who made long shifts feel short. We were always paired up, always on the same calls. He was steady, smart, and the person you trusted to double-check your work when the margin of error was too thin. One day, our project lead decided he needed something done fast. He wanted us to work on equipment we weren't trained for. Not slightly outside our expertise, I mean equipment we had no business touching. We pushed back at first. We weren't certified, we didn't have the clearance, and we knew the risks. But he kept pressuring us, saying things like, "It'll be fine," and "just get it done." You know, the classic phrases someone uses right before everything goes horribly wrong. Eventually, we caved, and I wish to God we hadn't. We were halfway through the task when I stepped outside to grab water bottles from the truck. Just a quick break, maybe 30 seconds, but halfway to the truck, I heard this deep electrical buzz, so loud it made my stomach drop, and then a violent bang that shook the ground under my feet, and then screaming. I ran back as fast as I could. When I got to the generator room, my friend was on fire, completely engulfed. The cabinet had arc blasted right in his face, and he was standing there burning alive. I'll never get the image out of my head. His skin was literally boiling off. He was clawing at his face, ripping pieces of himself away while trying to put out the flames. People talk about nightmares, but that moment burned itself into my memory so deeply I still wake up drenched in sweat years later. I sprinted to the truck, grabbed the fire blanket, and smothered the flames as best I could. Then I got him into a recovery position and called our shop, begging them to send rescue to our location. I don't know how he stayed conscious or how he found it in him to fight, but somehow he survived. Well, his body survived. 80 to 90% of his skin was 2nd and 3rd degree burns. He coded over and over in the hospital. The oxygen deprivation destroyed his brain. He lost his eyes, his sense of smell, taste, most of his sense of touch. Honestly, I'm not even sure how much he hears anymore. Now he lives in a full-time care facility, stuck in a vegetative state, alive but not really here. And the part that haunts me the most, if I hadn't walked away for water, it would have been both of us. The company got sued, of course, settled out of court for millions. Everyone made statements about safety protocol and systemic miscommunication, but the project lead, the guy who pushed us, who ignored the rules, who basically walked my friend straight into a death sentence, he didn't go to jail, just lost his job. That's it. It's strange how the world works. If you burn someone's face off with your own hands, you'd spend life in prison. But if you order someone to do something unsafe and they burn their face off, your punishment is unemployment. I still visit my friend sometimes. I don't know if he knows I'm there.
I don't know if any part of him is still in that body, but I go anyway, because I was supposed to have his back, and because I can't forget the moment everything went wrong, the day we said yes when we should have said no. Story 5. My dad survived an execution attempt only because the gun jammed. When I was a teenager, I thought the world was dangerous in big, dramatic ways. Car chases, explosions, things you only saw in movies. But the reality is, danger usually shows up quietly, in moments that feel ordinary until they suddenly aren't. And the night my dad almost died is burned into my memory for exactly that reason. My dad had this long-running feud with another guy in town. It wasn't anything noble or dramatic, just messy grown-up drama. My dad was dating the guy's ex-wife, and the other guy, for whatever reason, couldn't let it go. They'd glare at each other around town, exchange insults, the usual petty nonsense you expect from people who never learned to act their age. One night, they bumped into a bar.
Story 7. My father punched a window, and it ended his entire life. When you're in high school, you think you're invincible. Everyone does. You think bad things happen in other towns, to other people, in stories you hear but never truly believe. And then something happens that snaps the world into focus so sharply, it almost hurts. There was this kid we all knew. Let's call him Bob. That was actually his nickname, and honestly, it fit him a little too well. He wasn't the brightest, but he had this loud confidence that made him the center of attention whether you wanted him to be or not. He was failing out of school, and instead of taking it seriously, he decided his grand protest would be stunt riding. Every day for a week, he'd show up with his motorcycle and do wheelies in front of the school. It was his way of saying, "You're not going to graduate me? Well, watch this." Teachers yelled at him, security tried to stop him, but he loved the attention, loved the feeling of being rebellious, loved pretending he had control over anything in his life. And then came the day everything went wrong. He showed up again, revving the engine like he was performing for an audience. Most of us just rolled our eyes. We'd seen it all before. He took his first lap, then his second. Same routine. But on the third lap, as he passed a pickup truck at just the wrong angle, something caught. His legs snagged the bumper. He was ripped clean off the bike and thrown onto the pavement head first. The sound was sickening. The silence afterward was worse. Kids screamed, some ran, some froze, some pulled out their phones because that's what teenagers do when they're terrified and don't know how to react. I remember standing there, staring, unable to process how quickly the air had shifted from cocky bravado to absolute horror. Bob died instantly. Just like that. 1 second he was showing off, and the next he was gone. The school ended up giving him a posthumous diploma. They said it was out of respect, but everyone knew it was mostly to quiet the parents who were furious about the whole situation. It felt like putting a bow on a tragedy no one wanted to talk about. Some people thought it was a kind gesture. Others thought it was ridiculous. But at the end of the day, nothing changed what happened. A while later, someone mentioned that once, when Bob was asked what his name spelled backward, he answered Oob. No irony, no sarcasm, just pure sincerity. It was funny at the time, one of those dumb teenage moments, but now, thinking back on it, the joke doesn't land the same way. Because the truth is, he got exactly what he wanted. Attention, a statement, a moment people would remember forever. But he never got to see it, never got to grow up, learn from it, move past it. His whole protest lasted maybe 20 seconds. His life ended in less than one. And we all learned a lesson none of us were ready for. You're only invincible until the moment you aren't. Story 8. My alcoholic roommate killed a cyclist and served only 6 months. My grandfather was the kind of man who never truly retired. Even in his 80s, he liked having something to do, some way to feel useful. So he worked part-time for a property rental company, checking in on tenants, collecting late payments, making sure everything was in order. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him purpose, and honestly, it suited him. He was gentle, patient, the kind of person you'd trust instantly. One of the tenants he was responsible for had fallen behind on rent. Nothing unusual there. People fall behind. Life gets messy. But this guy stopped answering calls altogether. No texts, no replies, nothing.
So my grandfather did what he always did. He went to the house to check on him. Not to threaten him, not to demand anything, just to make sure he was okay. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. Eventually, the tenant opened the door, and whatever happened in that moment, it broke something inside him. Maybe he panicked about being confronted. Maybe he thought he was about to get evicted. Or maybe he just snapped under the weight of his own life. I'll never know. But instead of talking, instead of asking for help, instead of doing literally anything else, he chose the one option you can never undo. He murdered my grandfather. An 80-year-old, unarmed, just doing his job. It happened so fast that by the time neighbors even realized something was wrong, it was already too late. The police came, the investigation ran its course, and my family tried to make sense of a world that suddenly felt unfair in a way we'd never experienced. And you'd think, for something this horrific, that justice would have some kind of bite to it, that the person responsible would face consequences so severe they'd never see daylight again. But the truth is almost more painful than the crime itself. Nothing happened to him. Not professionally, not legally, not personally. He walked away from killing an elderly man with the same ease he walked away from paying his rent. No jail time, no charges that stuck, no accountability anyone outside the family ever felt. Meanwhile, we were left trying to explain to ourselves how someone could kill a man as harmless as my grandfather and still wake up the next morning like nothing had happened. I used to think the justice system was imperfect. Now, I think it's selective, severe when it wants to be, blind when it's convenient, and absolutely useless when you need it most. People online sometimes tell me, you have to forgive, or you can't carry this forever. But forgiveness isn't the problem. It's the fact that my grandfather's life was treated like it was worth nothing, like he was just an inconvenience someone could erase without consequence. And I'll be honest, every time I drive past that neighborhood, every time I see someone who looks even remotely like the man who killed him, the same thought runs through my head. How does someone get to destroy a life so easily and walk away untouched? Story 9. The Marine who tried to sell explosives at a bar. There are stories about people ruining their lives that make you shake your head, and then there are stories like this. Stories that make you wonder how a human being can escalate something so small into something unforgivably tragic. I didn't know the people involved personally, but I read about it, and it stuck with me in a way I didn't expect. There was this restaurant, not fancy, just a normal place where people grab lunch after work. One evening, a group of 4 came in, ordered a bunch of food, racked up a bill of around $100, and then decided they didn't feel like paying. So they sprinted out the door. A dine and dash. Stupid, petty, but unfortunately not uncommon. And the server, a 22-year-old, didn't even chase them. She didn't try to stop them, didn't yell, didn't touch them. All she did was walk outside and try to write down their license plate number so her manager could file a report. That's it. That was the extent of her involvement. But the people in that car saw her with a pen and a piece of paper and apparently decided that was enough justification to turn a petty theft into a murder. They hit the gas. They drove straight at her, and they ran her over. She wasn't even blocking them. She wasn't even close. She was just doing her job, quietly, calmly, trying to collect enough information so the restaurant wouldn't have to eat the cost of their meal. Those 4 people killed her over a bill that wasn't even expensive. $100, a pair of sneakers, a grocery run. That's what a human life was worth to them. I remember reading the details afterward, thinking how surreal it all sounded. Who escalates like that? Who looks at a young woman standing in a parking lot holding a pen and decides the solution is to run her down with a 2-ton vehicle? Her coworkers were the ones who found her. She hadn't even been trying to be a hero. She wasn't confronting anyone or playing detective. She was just doing the one small, reasonable thing anyone in her position would do. The restaurant shut down for a few days after that. Not because they had to, but because everyone was grieving. She was only 22. She had dreams, plans, friends, a life, everything ahead of her. And all of it disappeared because 4 people couldn't scrape together $100 or, simply not commit a crime in the first place. The part that haunts me isn't just the violence, It's the casual cruelty behind it, the speed, the thoughtlessness, the way something so ordinary became irreversible. When I hear stories like this, I finally understand why places like Walmart and Target tell their employees to not chase shoplifters. Because some people are so catastrophically stupid, so wildly unpredictable, that even the smallest confrontation can make them snap. And now, a young woman is gone forever. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she crossed paths with people who valued their convenience more than her life. Story 10. He killed a man over a single grapefruit. There's a story I heard years ago that still doesn't make sense to me. Not because it's complicated, but because it's so absurd, so avoidable that every time I think about it, I wonder how a human being can throw their life away over something that literally grows on trees. I knew a man who owned a small farmer's market. He wasn't rich, he wasn't flashy, just a hard-working guy who woke up early, stacked crates of fruit, and ran his stall with quiet pride. He treated customers like neighbors, even if they weren't. The kind of man who'd slip an extra apple into your bag just because you'd had a hard week. But there was this one guy, though, someone who constantly stole from him, not out of hunger, not out of desperation, just because he could. Grapes one day, a peach the next, little things. Enough to be irritating, but not worth calling the cops over. But one afternoon, this guy took it further. He grabbed a grapefruit, just one grapefruit, and tried to bolt for his car. And the owner, sick of being stolen from, sick of being pushed around, finally snapped and chased after him. Not to fight him, not to arrest him, just to confront him, maybe scare him out of doing it again. But the thief reached his car first. He got in, he started the engine, and instead of backing up or driving away like any rational person would do, he panicked, or maybe he didn't panic at all, maybe he just